The Foreign Affairs Committee are continuing their inquiry into the workings of the Foreign Office and the appointment of Peter Mandelson in particular. And we have just had a break, but we are now continuing our session with Morgan McSweeney. Thank you very much for coming. I understand, could you just introduce who you are? And I understand that there's a brief statement that you want to make before we ask you some questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Morgan McSweeney. I was a former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Keir Starmer from October 2024 till February of this year. Chair, thank you for inviting me to appear before this committee today. I hope to assist you in your work as fully as I can. Before addressing the specific matters before you, I'm grateful that you've allowed me to say something briefly. First, I want to say something about the victims and survivors connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Too often, discussions of public figures and appointments can lose sight of the human suffering at the centre of these matters. Women and girls were abused, exploited and scarred. They deserved protection then, and they deserve to be remembered now. I'm sorry for any part this controversy has played in causing further hurt or distress. I've spent much of my working life trying, in whatever role I held, to make this country fairer, stronger and more successful. I have always believed public service is a privilege. It brings responsibility and scrutiny, but it also brings a meaningful chance to improve people's lives. That is what motivated me in government. The appointment of Mandelson as ambassador was a serious error of judgment. I advised the Prime Minister in support of that appointment, and I was wrong to do so. As I said in my resignation statement, I resigned because I believe responsibility should rest with those who make serious mistakes. Accountability in public life cannot apply only when it is convenient. The Prime Minister relied on my advice, and I got it wrong. It is also important, however, to distinguish between what I did do and what I did not do. What I did do was make a recommendation based on my judgment that Mandelson's experience, relationships and political skills could serve the national interest in Washington at an important moment. That judgment was a mistake. What I did not do was oversee national security vetting, ask officials to ignore procedures, request that steps should be skipped, or communicate explicitly or implicitly that checks should be cleared at all costs. I would never have considered that acceptable. These processes are in place to protect our national security. Finally, I want to place on record my respect for those who serve our country through public institutions, MPs, ministers, civil servants, diplomats, security professionals and many others whose work is demanding, often unseen. In the Cabinet Office, the Foreign Office and 10 Downing Street, there will be many people working long hours now to understand what happened here and to ensure lessons are learned. They deserve fairness and respect as they do that work. Chair, I'm here to assist the committee in its work. I made a serious mistake in recommending Mandelson's appointment. I accept the consequences and hope today I can help the committee to establish the facts and to make sure the right lessons are learned.
Thank you. So why was it necessary to replace Karen Pierce at all?
So should I set out the timetable of my understanding of the various different decision making? So
I'm going to do that,
okay,
but I just wondered if I could just start with, how did it even become an issue?
So my understanding is that before we were in government, the civil service were deciding who to appoint Karen Pierce when her term came to an end, and that in the access talks with Simon Case, Simon Case was informed that the Prime Minister was minded to make a political appointment in the role of ambassador. So that predates my time as a Chief of Staff. At the time, I was working in opposition and I wasn't working as part of the transition team. When I came in as Chief of Staff, I understood that to be the general direction the Prime Minister wanted to go in, and that a formal decision was made not until after the US presidential elections, because he rightly wanted to wait until after seeing who was elected US President on the 5th of November.
So is there a note of the discussion around whether or not it should be a political appointment, or are you saying that it was something that had already been decided before Labour got into government?
So Well, I only found out this weekend as I was trying to piece together the full picture, and I called Simon Case to ask him what his recollection was, and his recollection was that January, February 2024, when he was inquiring about what Labour might want to do with the US ambassador, as they were considering who to replace Karen Pierce with, he was told the Prime Minister was minded to make a political appointment. As far as I know then, the next decision was taken in early November, so the decision by the Prime Minister was formally taken in early November after the US presidential election. So I've seen a box note that went from the Prime Minister's private office, his foreign policy private office, and his PPS, and which asked him explicitly would he like to go ahead with a political appointment or make a civil service appointment. I don't recall any conversation about that, and then the next thing is that he is requesting who could potentially fill that post.
That's the box note of the 11th of November, which is on page 2 of the humble address materials, and it's a PS note to the Prime Minister.
Yes,
it talks about that the current ambassador to Washington has been making good inroads with the Trump team, and then talks about on timing of appointment and announcement. Talking about what the options are essentially.
Yes, and I didn't input into that box note.
No. And neither did anybody else, it looks like. I mean, when it comes to the Prime Minister's comments on it or the Outer Office comments, there wasn't anything on that.
So I don't think there was any input from any of the SPADs into that. It was just a straightforward, what would you like to do, Prime Minister, but there wasn't a recommendation.
There was a list of candidates. David Miliband, Cathy Ashdown, Peter Mandelson, even George Osborne were the sort of names that, according to The Guardian and the Tom Baldwin's book, were the sort of candidates that were being considered at the time. Is that right?
Those sound like the right names to me. I think that I don't recall there being much discussion ahead of the US presidential election. I think the Prime Minister wanted to rightly wait to see the outcome of that. I think if Kamala Harris had won that US presidential election, I don't think that Peter Mandelson would have necessarily been appointed, and he probably wouldn't have been. I think the Prime Minister started to seriously consider names after the US election.
Just so that we get the timeline right, you became head of office on the 6th of October.
Yes.
You really wanted Peter Mandelson to be the ambassador, didn't you?
I thought he was the right choice after the US presidential election. The reason why I thought he was the right choice is because Britain was exposed, the UK was exposed after Brexit. We left the European Union without any US trade deal. And for me, honestly, this was the top priority of the Prime Minister, was to get a US trade deal with the Americans. And I thought that based on Mandelson's experience as an EU Trade Commissioner, that made him the strongest candidate. But like everybody else, I made clear to the Prime Minister there was pros and cons, and there was risks. I don't think the Prime Minister would have chosen Mandelson if Kamala Harris had been elected President. I think he considered about who would be the right fit for the White House, and we procured him a short list of 2 strong candidates at that point.
I'll come on to that in a minute. But I mean, you wanted. I mean, it was more than that. It was personal as well, wasn't it? I mean, he was your mentor, particularly when you became Chief of Staff, because you had no experience of the weird and wonderful world of Whitehall. But obviously Peter Mandelson did. So didn't he become an indispensable and venerated confidant for you?
He was a confidant for me, but I don't confidant. Beg pardon. But I didn't regard him as my mentor. I first had a conversation with Peter Mandelson in 2017. I don't think I really started to go to him for advice until about 2021, and I was 44 years of age then. So I didn't regard him at all as a mentor. I got advice from him, and it was useful. But I also had other people around who were perhaps a bit more shy with the media, who I sought to for advice. We brought in some extremely experienced people from the Blair administration. So Liz Lloyd came into our team, Jonathan Powell came into our team, and I would certainly ask both of those for advice about how things work as well. So I asked a range of people for advice and help. I don't regard Mandelson as ever being a mentor, but certainly as an advisor.
So, I mean, when the New Statesman says that Morgan wouldn't breathe without consulting Peter Mandelson first, that's not fair.
Yeah, you forgive me if I don't believe everything that's written about me in the papers, but I don't think that was true. He was somebody who I sought for advice, but both when I was campaign director and as chief of staff, I built a wide network of people who had done jobs similar to mine in the past, going back decades in the Labour Party.
And I will go into. I mean, I really wanted to just sort of start with. I mean, you began by working for Excalibur, didn't you? Which was run by Peter Mandelson. It was an attack and rebuttal unit, basically, in '97, and you worked on that. And one of the things was to also do work on Labour MPs who might be perceived as disloyal.
So again, Chair, I'm glad that I can correct some of the records on this, because this is all a bit of a mythos here.
This comes from the Independent.
Yes. So I was an intern at the Labour Party in the 2001 general election. I was an intern. I was assigned to the attack and rebuttal team.
So you didn't work in '97 for Excalibur?
No, I did.
So 2001 was your first time.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And my job. And I hate to dispel the myth to maybe some people from different political parties about what Excalibur was, but all I did was glue bits of newspaper to A4 paper and scan it into a machine. Mm-hmm. It was.
We've all done it.
Literally, that was as sophisticated as my job got. The team wasn't run by Mandelson. The team was run by Spencer Livermore, right. And it included lots of future Labour politicians and SPADs. I never met or spoke to Mandelson in that election, and I didn't even report into who is now Lord Livermore. It was much more junior people that I reported into.
And then what I wanted to ask you about was about the accounts in the I paper on the 4th of February 26, that Mandelson was helping to vet candidates, that he was given access to a secret Google spreadsheet of potential candidates, and that there was an off-the-books exercise. There's quite a lot of detail in the article about it, which tends to give at least an aura of authenticity to such reports.
Mandelson had nothing to do with the selection or the vetting of any of our parliamentary candidates. I don't know what Google Doc the I is referring to. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a party document. I don't think that we kept...
No, I think it's an off-the-books exercise. I think that's the point.
Well, but it had nothing to do with me or the party. I was in a senior role in the party at the time. We did everything on the books. There might have been other people compiling their own lists, but his role had no official impact on the selection of our candidates. Our vetting was done by a team inside HQ, and it was all to do with... It wasn't to do with political vetting. It was to do with inappropriate things they might have said or done prior to becoming candidates. And it was an NEC process to determine the suitability of potential parliamentary candidates. But Mandelson was not involved in the selection of our candidates.
And there was a strategy document called Labour for the Country, which was written, I believe, after the Hartlepool by-election defeat. And is it right that Peter Mandelson had a big input into that? I mean, it's your document, but that he was involved in that too.
So I wrote that document in February 2021, ahead of the local elections to the Prime Minister, because I believe there was challenges the party was facing that it needed to address, and I think Hartlepool showed the scale of the political challenge we had if we wanted to win the next general election. And I certainly asked Mandelson for input into that document, but it was my document. The argument was mine, but I also sent it to half the shadow cabinet. I also sent it to other colleagues, all the senior staff, or most of the senior staff in Lotto at the time. I sent it to, and a document like that where I'm trying to gather my own thoughts, I might send it to 10, 15 people to say, can you give me a view? People from all across the party. But like I said earlier about Mandelson, most of the people who I would go to for advice were much shyer with the media. So you could quite easily put 15 contributors towards a document like that. But it was my document, and it was my argument that I wanted to make to the leader of the party at the time about the direction I thought we needed to take.
After Angela Rayner resigned, and when there was the reshuffle on the 5th of September 2025, it's claimed that Peter Mandelson masterminded the reshuffle In fact, there's a quote, this is not normal. He was US ambassador. Why was he masterminding the reshuffle? This is reported in the Daily Mail. Patrick Maguire says that on the day of the reshuffle, Peter Mandelson was in number 10 and wouldn't leave. And according to the New Statesman, just before his sacking, Mandelson had been in number 10 to advise on the first cabinet reshuffle.
Again, I'm very pleased I get the chance to correct the record on this. Mandelson was in the Cabinet Office and then understood came into number 10 on the day of the reshuffle, but he was not involved in the reshuffle. The reshuffle was extremely challenging because it was a bad day for our party, for the government. We had just lost the Deputy Prime Minister, and we needed to reorganise the government at pace, and the Prime Minister wanted to go ahead and do that. The text messages from Mandelson to me on the day, I believe, will be made available at the humble address. I can't remember precisely what he said, but he texted me his thoughts, and I have to say, on a reshuffle day, I get texted a lot of thoughts from a lot of people. The people who I would respond to and get back to would be cabinet members or other senior staff to ask them their views. I did not respond to any of Mandelson's texts. The text messages set out ideas of people that he thought should be in particular positions. None of his suggestions actually came out to be the case, so his ideas were not followed up. I don't mind getting ideas, but I didn't have a conversation with him about his ideas. He asked me to see me. I don't think I actually bumped into him. I may have done, but I definitely didn't discuss the reshuffle with him. The only text back from me to him is at the end of the day, where I said, look, I thought we did well considering the circumstances today, but I did not take him up on his offers of advice, and I did not act on any of the advice that he gave, and I did not ask him his views on any ministerial appointments.
And so are any of your text messages to Peter Mandelson, or not, going to be available in the humble address?
Yes.
And why is he texting you if you're both at number 10 on the same day?
Because he's not in the room.
And you didn't bump into him?
I might have bumped into him. I don't recall, but I certainly didn't ask him his views. And at the point that he texted me, so the way, and this was my only government reshuffle, there is a big gap between the Prime Minister taking a decision and then the media hearing about it, because we go through a number of processes, especially we have to go to the palace before it's announced publicly to ask the King's permission. So by the time we get to the afternoon, all of the work is done and you're making phone calls, and where the staff move on to is the next day. People text me. I don't like, and they're entitled to do so. I mean, it will be backbench MPs, it'll be ministers, staff members, ex-staff members, journalists, and they will all text me their ideas. Everyone has an idea of how to make.
This is the American. This is the ambassador to the United States of America. He's in number 10 on the day of a reshuffle. I mean, it does look odd. At the very least, will you accept that?
It wasn't a planned reshuffle. If we had all hoped the day before that the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner would get cleared and that we wouldn't have had to do a reshuffle. That was our hope. Had Laurie Magnus gone another way, we wouldn't have had a reshuffle at all. So Mandelson wouldn't have been able to just arrive out of thin air. He happened to be in the Cabinet Office that day, and I don't know why he walked into number 10. But in the room which we were organising the reshuffle, there was the Prime Minister, there was the Chief Whip, I think, came in once he had been appointed new, or maybe he was there the next day, and then there was a handful of his senior staff. Mandelson was not in the room. The Prime Minister did not seek his advice, but as Chief of Staff, on a reshuffle day, and it was true in opposition, I get a lot of text messages from people, and most of them I don't even read. I'll pay attention to the ones I get from cabinet members or from senior staff with their ideas, and most of the rest of them I just filter out, and at the end of the day I go back to them and say thanks for your input. I don't know why he did it, but people do it.